Hey guys, this is Mike from 850 Armor Works. Thanks for joining us here on this video. Here we are going to be going over a couple of things. So number one, this is a Incinerator Trooper or Rogue One Stormtrooper speed build that we're getting ready for DragonCon 2023. I'm going to take y'all over all the basic armor building. A lot of this is the same as some of our other tutorial videos like the biceps, the forearms, the shin assemblies for the tank drivers. We're basically doing a lot of the same things. So you'll be able to refer back to those and see where they're going. I also like the abdomen. You'll be able to refer to those. There are only going to be a few tips and tricks, but what I'm really running through here is going on a speed build. I build a lot of armor. Armor is not hard for me to assemble at all, as long as you follow the certain steps and whatnot you need to do. I will not be doing every single part. A lot of these are, hey, it's got its basic assembly, it's getting tossed to the side because it needs other things like cover strips or knee details added on, things like that. That'll come later. So this is all just basically, hey, these are gluing the plastic parts together. So that's out of the way. Let me go over the parts we really don't need to worry about. And before we go over the parts we don't need to worry about, trimming your armor. You will not see me trimming armor on this workbench unless it is for snipping something or a size adjustment. So all the parts are going to be pre-trimmed. I do all my trimming on a bandsaw. And that's why we have these little fuzzy things right here on the edge. All I have to do at that point is a little bit of palm sander, a little bit of belt sander, a little bit of palm sander, and it's good to go. So that's how that works. Going over the parts that we really just need to trim, sand, and toss to the side before paint. First one, your shoulder bells. They go right here. Once these are trimmed up, all they're waiting on is paint. All these need right now is a little bit of edge sanding, and they're good to go. Not going to do that right now. Posterior. It's a posterior. This is one of the last things I even assemble after paint, so not worried about it. Cod plate. One of the last things I assemble again, too. I like to keep this removable, so it's nothing we really worry about at this stage. Trim it, sand it, you're good to go. Right there. Hand plates. Trim, sand, get them ready to paint. Now, these are the little side wings that go between the chest and the back. They're going to attach to the back, and you know, you can Velcro it or use some nylon or whatever in the front. I made these in black. I only have to worry about painting these. I'm not assembling them on the armor because I'm going to have to mask them off. I'll do that later. They go in the box. Done. All right. Things we have to assemble. So what do we want to assemble first? I usually start with the arms because they're easy. But I haven't done a thigh tutorial yet, so let's do the thighs. Now, thighs consist of inside, outside. That's about it. All we got on the thighs here. Other parts we will have on the thighs is going to be the knee brick. This is a part that comes a little bit later. So, I'm going to start making sure that everything is edge sanded here. That's where I'm going to bust out my handy dandy palm sander. All right, that's parts edge sanded, ready to go. Your inside has the big cutout. So what these are going to do is we are going to butt join these together. Very simple little process. Sanding, sanding, sanding. Sandpaper. Sand the inside. And then what we're going to butt join them with is some scrap ABS here. They're going to go across the full length on the inside. We will glue one side first and then the other. I need a little bit more than this, so I'm just going to split this one in half. Actually, I think I'll be okay. I think I can make do with what I got. So this is scoring and snapping. Make a couple scores with a razor blade. And then snap it. So just like these, sand it. Yeah, you can just toss them on the bench. They'll be all right. Ooh. See, I can use some clamps. And we're going to line it up about halfway. Take a pencil. Mark it. That's where we're going to put a glue line. So make sure your plastic is dust free. Take some thick super glue. Follow on the inside of that line there. Then you can follow that pencil mark down. It's not one of these things that has to be absolutely perfect. It's just a good guide point so you're not absolutely guessing at it. So putting a little pressure on. I'm going to take a little accelerator on the back end, squirt it down in there. See, clamps would be really handy right here. It's just all our clamps are in use somewhere else. In fact, I'm going to have to steal a couple of clamps because doing the other half is just pain in the rear. So there's the first half. Now, make sure you get the right opposing part. You don't want to, do something like this. So we got this one. Make sure they butt up together okay. We're not concerned about how clean these edges are right here. It's going to have a big resin cover strip that goes over it. So we're looking good there. We'll continue on. Some glue. Make sure you're lined up at the bottom. So that is what's important. Get a little squirt to get it going. All right. Now it's joined together. Now, I already know this armor fits me just fine as it is, so I haven't done any sizing or adjustments. If you need to make it more narrow, you can trim off a little bit on the middle and bring it in a little bit more narrow. I generally prefer to have armor a little bit bigger and add padding. So that's the majority of the right thigh. Now we're going to move on to the left thigh. There is one special thing we do with that. And the right thigh is getting the knee block details. I'm not worried about this gap right here. This gap makes no difference whatsoever. Hidden detail doesn't matter. So we'll go over how to join this a little bit later. I am going to steal this off the top because it is a great tool to have a little bit later. So that can go in my box. Same thing here. Down. The left eye, on the other hand, has nothing covering this. So since we have a nice little gap right here, we're going to use that scrap plastic, glue it on the inside, and fill it real quick. And by filling it real quick, I mean really quick. It's not going to take long, and this is exactly what super glue is intended for. So we got that little scrap of plastic. It's already sitting about the perfect size. Just going to make a little bridge right here. Okay, that's set really well. Now I still have another little gap right here. So here's your next magic trick. Plain old masking tape. I'm going to put this masking tape over this hole. Go with the outline and shape of the part. Flip it back over. Get your super glue back out. Drop you some super glue in this hole. Get a little squirt of accelerator. Doesn't hurt to go back behind it again. A little bit of extra. Flip it. Pull your tape off. There's going to be some uncured glue there. Give it a little squirt and it's cured. So that's going to finish filling that gap. We still have a little bit more of a gap here. You can use body filler, but super glue is faster. It only takes a few seconds. Come behind it with palm sander. Still have a couple of small little gaps. Do it again. While that's setting, we'll show you we use thick, excellent gap filling capacity. That's why we use thick. We also use thick so it doesn't run all over the place. It will run, but not absolutely everywhere like thin or water thin. So this is cured. Again. Now we're fully smooth right here and ready for paint. I've got a little bubble left right here, but since we're gonna have a cover strip over it, it's butting right next to it. I'm not really concerned about that. That's unseen detail. So we are done with the left thigh until it's time for cover strips. Go ahead and move us on to the shins and the calves. As y'all can see, I've done this a few times, so I know exactly which parts are which. So with our molds that we have here, we have the outsides are a completely smoothish edge. The insides kind of come down to a little bit of a point. So that's the easy way to identify it. For the most part, when you're done assembling these, unless you have really long legs like me, you're going to end up trimming a lot of this off anyway. It's just a really good identifier. So I'm going to move back on to doing more palm sanding to clean up these edges. Alrighty. Now let's determine again which one's the right and which one's the left. So this one's the right because we got a little pointy. Let's also determine which way we want the rear to overlap. That's going to determine where you have your positioning here. Because one way is going to be a little easier, one way is going to be a little bit harder. So this is going to be my right leg. I don't want it overlapping outside. Well, I'm sorry. I don't want it overlapping inside over the outside. I don't want to look on the side and see this edge. So we want this outside overlapping there. So that's going to determine which sides I'm going to glue. So I'm gluing this inside edge. This outside edge. So, right along with pencil marking, test fitting, very important before you ever put a drop of glue on something. Test fit, test fit, test fit. Can't stress that enough. So just applying a little pressure. I'd really prefer to have a couple of clamps here, clamp at the top, clamp at the bottom, but I'm going to have to make do. Just making sure I get both the inside and outside seam so that we have a very strong and sturdy part. So there is your right leg. Now, looking at your reference, the right thigh has that block detail. So the right calf has nothing on top of it. The left calf gets this. So same as that left thigh, we're going to go ahead and fill this seam in right here. I want this to look like one smooth, consistent seam. So doing the same thing. I'm just going to kind of build it up with a little bit of super glue. Squirt it lightly. Let that cure up really well. Start sanding. It's pretty close to getting in one shot on this. So for extra reinforcement, I'm going to run a little more on. All right, that is that. That completes the right thigh, or right calf. Moving on to the left calf. Repeat the same procedure to verify which side we want to overlap here in the front. Okay. It's easier for this to go over this way. It's on the left. You're not seeing it. You're going to keep the seam on the inside here. So now we know that this is the top, this is the bottom. So we're going to sand those sides. Let's test fit again. Make sure everything looks good. Remember, there's going to be a cover strip that goes over this. That completes the left calf. What we will cover in the resin cover strip sections, after the resin cover strip goes on, that's when this goes on. So it's going to glue directly down to the cover strip right there, and we will deal with that whenever we get to that section. All right, next part, let's cover the abdomen. So we have the front abdomen. These are the sides. They're going to come to you looking more like this. Just split this straight down the middle, because these are going to overlap right here. And this is acting as shims and adjustments in case you're girthy like me, and then your cover plate or your trauma plate, and it's going to end up going right here dead center. This is the last thing to go on. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and make sure we are lined up and everything looks good here. I don't have a completely straight cut right here, so I'm going to take this to the belt sander real quick and even this out so it's one smooth, straight, long cut. Now it's nice and straight. Get rid of the burrs. Much better looking. So we know we're going to be gluing here and here. Go ahead and pre-sand it. It's all things pencil mark. This is where clamps really come in handy though. So that's the area I know I'm gluing. Repeat on this side. Okay. Now we have a little bit of overlap at the top. If you want to be all accurate and stuff, you can scoop this down a good bit and have it come back, whatever. That's up to you. So we're going to use the Biceps for that. I just kind of bring it up and angle it, level it all off. And these are uneven down here. So we just even that up going straight across. The belt covers it anyway. There we go. So that's the base abdomen. Next is going to come the extension strips. So we know we're going to be gluing here and here. I'm going to go ahead and just pre-sand these. I'm wiping off the dust with this because you're going to get a little bit of dust and you don't want to be gluing down dust to dust. You want to be gluing plastic to plastic. So that's all the towel wiping is. You can do it with your hand, you can do it with a shirt, you can do it with a rag, you can do it with a towel, doesn't matter. So this is how this is going to end up setting up. And this is the one thing I can't really do by myself. This is going to be on me. So what I have to do is bring my lovely assistant over, and she's going to make some pencil marks for me. So when we're doing this, you're getting some help. Get it lined up in the center. Same thing back here. You want it lined up straight with your neck. You've got some playroom for adjustment in case you're a little bit off so that this square stays centered. The other option, now I'm doing this girdle style. All this is going to be one piece. I'm pulling it up and cinching in my big fat gut. If you want to, you can split this and then use this as an adjustment piece. I don't like doing that with the Stormtroopers because the rear belt overlaps the front belt, and that makes it very difficult to keep it all together and take on and off. I haven't really found a great system for doing that, so the girdle style just seems to be the best for me. So carrying on here, we're going to make sure that I'm lined up in the center. We're going to put this on in the back. This is where I want to be. I'm going to hand her a pencil, and we're going to turn around here a little bit.
Feel Brian?
Am I centered? That's all I'm really worried about. Okay. Then draw me 2 pencil marks. All done? We have our pencil marks. Let's remember which side is which. This was my left. I'm just going to mark them with lefts and rights so I don't get confused. And which side is up? Since I have this lovely pencil mark, we're going to do another butt joint over here. I'm going to follow this pencil mark as perfectly as I can. So we pre-sanded back here and get a little sanding here. Just go ahead and go over the whole piece. May as well. It's faster this way. I know I don't need this much for a butt joint, so I'll probably trim off a little extra here. Let's trim it off over here. Get plenty of extra plastic with your kits. Same as always here. Let's line it up. Get a pencil mark. Left side is in. Do the right side. I'm getting ready to put this part in, and this is why we needed good cuts and good pencil marks, because we want to make this seam here as easy to fill as possible. So we're looking good all over here. That side's in. Prepare it for this side here. So there is a complete torso to fit my stomach. The girdle style. It's going to flip up here. Just go straight up and down. Let me stick my gut out and relax. Access some back support back here. And the only piece left is going to be gluing on this. Now, yeah, I got enough room. If you end up butt joining and your butt joins are back here and this covers it, you don't have to worry about it so much. If they're a little closer in right here, hold off on putting this part on until you filled these seams and sanded them. So, free sand. The Wi-Fi's broken. Then let's line this up with the center here. It's where our pencils are going to come in handy again. It's a nice guide point. Going to use a little different accelerator here. This will work for both. It's just different applications, different accelerators I'll prefer. And there we go. There's our mostly complete abdomen. All it needs now is seam filling back here. You can use regular Bondo if you want to. You can come in and use the super glue and sand it down. I'm going to Bondo it. I'm going to Bondo it off camera. This is faster, and this is instance. I just like the Bondo a little better. It's easier for me to work with. All right, that wraps up our abdomen. We'll move on to the next thing. We're moving on to the next parts. We're going to go with the forearms. These are the most simple parts that we can possibly do. They are designed completely for overlap. So we're going to have one side of the smooth side that has an indent and one side that is a flat side. So the indented side goes on the flat side of the laddered forearm. The smooth side goes on the raised part of the forearm. That's going to determine what your left and your rights are. And if you need to shrink these in for a little bit smaller of a wrist, you can do that. We're just going to permanently glue these together and start with the sanding. So that's sanded. Going to proceed to gluing. Always sand before you glue. So I always start with the indented side, because we really don't need pencil marks to get that done. They're just going to line it up, make sure everything looks okay. You got any of the ugly rough parts off. And yeah, everything looks good. Little clamp. Keep holding it. On the inside. And get a strong bond going. Now this other side, you have some adjustment. You can go full on in, can bring it in a little bit more if you like. Got to keep mine a touch more narrow. Clamp it on. Do your pencil mark. If you need to, we can trim away some of this excess. There's no real reason to have it all. So I'm lining up to this pencil mark here. Try to clamp. Keep holding pressure all the way to the back. Bit on the inside. That's good to go. This is the left forearm, but I'm wearing a watch. And maybe I'll get it on. Yeah, I can get it on. There we go. There's our left forearm done. We'll save the cover strips for a little later. There again, we're starting with this side. Go ahead and pre-sand. Well, starting with this indented side, it's going to go here. Check it out. Well, I can cut off a little excess. Yep, little off. That's okay. Wow. You know, there's our right forearm sliding on. Well, that completes our forearms till we get to the cover strips. Back in the box and move on to the next part. Okay, continuing on with this Stormtrooper fast build. Next parts up are going to be the biceps. So the biceps, there is really no left and right, up and down, and you can be Arnold Schwarzenegger and still be able to fit inside of these. So I know for a fact I'm going to have to trim these down for me. I have these puny little arms here, and we're just going to do an overlap assembly. That's always fun. It's a little easier to do it this way. Just squeeze it together. Stick your arm through, kind of gauge where you are. We're going to have cover strips, and I want these to meet a little bit more in the middle. So I'm going to take roughly 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch off on each side to accommodate my skinny little arms. So just using a pair of snips. And go as straight down as possible. Get a little bit off. Now you can butt join these together if you find them right in the middle and then use the cover strip to cover that seam. I'm just going to be doing an overlap construction. So we'll take a look again, see about where we are, see if I need any more taken off. You do want to leave a little room. Don't ever try to make your armor skin tight like this. That's going to restrict movement. It's better to have it a touch bigger so you can have some padding. My cut's actually a little off right here, not quite perpendicular. That's a little better looking. Yeah, that's much better. So I like the way that looks, the size. Check to make sure everything's kind of centered. Everything looks right, like you're keeping your swoop details. But the first thing I'm going to do is pinch it and give me some pencil marks. Now, you want to do these one side at a time. So that's how much we have. This is how much we know we have to work with. Sandpaper. These are our glued edges. And something else I want to point out on this piece specifically, got a little bit of light orange peel right here where the sheet got overheated or there's a little bit of moisture in it. This is taken off super easily. Like if it's extreme pitted orange peel, it's usually not sent out. But something like this is so minor that either a little bit of sandpaper it's going to pretty much take it right off. Now I need to find my other sandpapers. To smooth it over. There's some 400 grit, smooth it back over. There. See? No more orange peel. It's gone. We got our sanded sides. Again, we get to that pencil mark. We test fit. Make sure we know where we're going. Glue. Glue that doesn't come out. Clamp in place. Now we can size up this other side. I wanted a little bit looser than that, but it was pretty good. And then there's a whole left bicep. So those resin cover strips are going to end up going straight down that line right there to hide that seam. If you're butt joining it, it'd be more about right here and just cover up that seam. If you have anything that's over, see, I'm more concerned about lining up on the bottom since this will be exposed over the top. When you got a little excess, just snip it off. So this is covered by the shoulder bell. It doesn't really matter too much. So I'm going to leave it out and repeat on the other side. So, other than fitting it on your arm, another way to check your size is just hold it up next to your other piece that you did. So see if we're about equal. And this way we know we're kind of in that ballpark for symmetry. I like to make sure these parts are lined up right. We'll do a quick test fit. We ought to be okay. And we'll pull it out just a touch. That fit is pretty good. See where I moved my thumb, I had a little super glue on it. That won't matter too much because it's going to get the cover strip. But you get a little something like that on there. Give it a quick sand. It's gone. You're going to need to sand these anyway for the cover strips. So that's where they'll be. So we got a left bicep, a right bicep, and I'm a Stormtrooper. So these are done. Let's move on to the next part. We have all these little cutoffs. You can always save these. Scrap plastic always comes in handy. We have plenty of scrap plastic around here. They're getting pitched. So next parts I'm going to cover are going to be the chest and the back, which include the shoulder straps. So we fitted the abdomen a little while ago, and one of the normal things that I see like from day one over 20 years is when people get their kits, they usually end up fitting their chest and their back first. That is one of the worst mistakes you can possibly make. You have to fit your chest and your back over your abdomen. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a lobster bib dinner plate right here, or it's going to be riding too high. Everything's not going to work together at that point. So we save this for last. But with this guy in specific, there's two ways we can do this. We can permanently attach the shoulder straps to the front and the back, or we can permanently attach the shoulder straps to the rear and leave the front removable. For storage purposes, I prefer leaving my chest separate. It fits all in my armor bin a little bit better. Everything nests a little bit better. And whenever it goes in the bin, it can kind of just stack like this and saves a lot of space. Can keep you from breaking any shoulder straps you have. So these are pretty simple. What you're going to need is your Dremel tool with cutoff wheel. Wear eye protection. You know, do as I say, not as I do. Now, all I did with this was cut 2 lines. I'm going to use this little pair of snips and get the rest of it out. Maybe. It's not want to get in there. There we go. And we'll clean up the mess we made with the melted plastic going in your face. Start test fitting these. Yeah. So they're going to fit into there. Just like this. So where do we want to glue them? I'm not going to use the wedge to glue. I'm going to glue directly down to the armor here. And we'll show you another method of attachment too. Back. I want to clean some of this up a little better. Kind of ugly. Metal file can come in handy. Okay. So we're going to glue on the shoulder straps. The sand here. And here. And we're going to go ahead and sand the inside here. I'm going to go ahead and do both sides while we wait to see what the alignment is going to be. Now, with the shoulder straps, there's kind of a left and a right. I kind of curve a different way. You're fine if you're off a little bit because it's so hard to tell. It's going to end up being personal preference. And do one for the front, one for the back. That looks pretty good to me. Going to just embed it a little bit here. See, it will adjust as far down as we need. Again, with the pencils, so we know where we're gluing. We know where to realign. Some glue in. Now I'm squeezing hard here. Shoot some accelerator in. That one's good. Before I permanently adhere this one, I want to take a look at it. Make sure everything's lined up. Will look good. Squeeze hard. Sure, I felt that shift on me. Good thing we have plenty of room. Now, let's do some reinforcement. You can see we have open spots right here. So I'm just going to take a couple of pieces of nylon, black nylon, and glue it down this way. Just in case something fails, you have a reinforcement. I did not flash and burn the edges because I want the super glue to penetrate into those edges. Basically, I'm not worried about it unraveling. So we see how far down it's going. You can also put the glue on the nylon itself. And I'm going to put some over the edge as a last bit of extra reinforcement. So, repeat on the other side. All right. That is attaching the shoulder straps to the back. As it sits, can go right on my back, no problem. We're going to use the Dremel again to get a couple of slots. See if I made these wide enough. It could be a little wider. No. Here we go. So if we're doing a separated fit after it gets painted, take some more of that nylon strap, and I'm going to do extensions coming off this way, wrapped in Velcro, and then it'll meet some Velcro down here to ensure everything stays on. But that's about it for the chest and the back. We'll move on to the next part. All right, welcome back to the next phase of building your own Rogue One Stormtrooper. So now we're going to be covering all of the resin components. First things first, let's take inventory and catalog what we have. I have everything laid out right here. These are your bicep cover strips. These are your forearm cover strips. This is the hamstring cover strip. This is the front of the thigh cover strip. These four right here are all the shin and calf cover strips, front and back. This is the thermal detonator mount. This is the circle detail for the back plate. This is the 2-bar detail for the back plate. This is the thermal detonator detail cover. This is the abdomen center detail, the left side of the abdomen detail, the right side of the abdomen detail. And this is how they're going to come right out of the box. They're going to have a shiny back. The first thing we have to do is take them over to wash and get them all washed down before we go and sand them. Now, we're cleaning and washing these to remove any of the residual mold release that's used in the casting process. We have to use a mold release and silicone rubber molds to pour in urethane resin, and it just leaves a residue. You can't paint on top of it. Nothing will stick to it. So we run it through here, get all the degreaser off of it, and then we go over and sand it. You never want to sand when you have fresh mold release on it, because you're going to impregnate the resin parts with mold release and you're going to have paint issues. So to get into the washing, it's actually really simple. The primary thing you're going to be using is going to be using a degreaser like Simple Green. You can use Purple Power or orange degreasers, anything of that nature. I'm going to do it in a shop sink, running hot water, and using a little scrubber. Just about any scrubber will work. You can use a toothbrush if you want to. We're going to get the hot water going. Start over here at one end and just work my way down. Squirt it down really well. And then scrub it. We're going to scrub it underneath the hot water. All right, now we're done cleaning. If you've watched our podcast, you're gonna hear us talk about building props. And the main thing we do when we're building props is sanding. Lots and lots of sanding, different types of sanding, palm sanding, hand sanding, fine sanding, oscillating sanding, and belt sanding. So if you're really into this hobby of building stuff, this is the #1 tool you really need to go buy, is a belt sander to put in your garage. We use this for everything. And we're going to be using it now to remove the shiny surface. You can't glue to a shiny surface, and plane off any of these parts. You saw in the mold area where we cast these are all open molds, so they're not always exactly the same height. And that's what we're going to use to correct on the belt sander. The next thing we're going to do is sometimes our molds deteriorate a little bit, and we get little tear outs and whatnot. We don't replace this mold quite yet, because this kind of stuff can just be sanded off pretty quickly. When it gets bad enough, we go ahead and replace it with a new mold. So let's get on with the belt sanding. that concludes all our belt sanding. We have all the shiny bits done. Parts are leveled off for the most part. And the little blemishes and defects that were here, the major parts are gone. We'll use a palm sander at this point to go ahead and clean up the top of the parts. So now, for more sanding. We're just going to be going over the surface of the part so the paint has something to stick to, pull away any additional blemishes. Now, some parts are going to end up having some little imperfections and whatnot in them. We're not too worried about those areas right now. When we go to the final assembly, we'll like put a little putty over those areas, but we will do things like sand down seam line. So, commence the sanding. I'll be using about 120 to 150 grit paper right here. You may have to pick up some sandpaper and sand a few parts by hand because the angles are a little awkward. I'm just going to run over it real quick to get any shiny rough coats off and move on to the next one. All right, there's some fine details in some areas where you can't always get with a palm sander, and that's where hand sanding is going to come in. Just going to use a little bit of 150 right here and go around the surface of the areas where I don't want to really lose any detail. And this is just to be sure that we get good paint adhesion. All right, that's about it for the hand sanding. We can come across and, do these next two. That was really all the fine detail we had to worry about. Doesn't hurt to scuff up the surface here. We're going to do one more little minor step. We use some compressed air and blow off any excess dust. Okay, that's it. All our parts are cleaned up. They're ready to go. Now we can move on to getting these done and a little bit of final assembly before we move on to paint. Now we are on to the final stage of assembly. That involves resin cover strips, fine detail parts, and some of the leftover assembly parts that we didn't have. First thing, let's cover materials. Super glue and accelerators. These are some of the primary things we're going to use for assembly. And next to that, it's our paid sponsorship by Surebonder and their high temp glue systems. If we're using hot glue, we do not use strictly off-the-shelf fabric store hot glue. There is a special formulation. Use the black sticks, number 707 R510B. It's on the Surebonder website. No, this is not a paid sponsorship. Been using this stuff for about a year since we discovered them at Dragon Con last year. They gave us some samples. We liked it. We built a few things with it. I think this is only our third box that we're on right here because super glue is still a staple. It's pretty good, but we don't use it for every application. You still have to sand before you glue anything down. So we got this one heating up, and we are using their cordless glue with extra batteries just in case. Keep some sandpaper handy. And our good trusty pencils, because we pencil mark just about everything. All right, what do we want to start with? Start with something really easy. We'll start with the back. The back gets the circle and the two bars. There's no real specific place to put this. It's all eyeball. There's no insets, nothing like that. We're going to put it over go ahead and put them both in. Make sure you get this right side up. So Stormtroopers, these go down. Death Troopers, these go up. Make sure they're that way. And just kind of eyeball it to start. Make sure everything looks even. Okay, happy with it. So I'm going to pull this. Pencil. Now the other one. I'll go ahead and put it back down. Everything looks even. Sandpaper. Done. See, that's not so bad. All right, so let's move on to a couple more easy parts. We'll start with the biceps. My wonderful tray of cover strips over here. And a special tool we may need later. When we were going over the assembly, we did the overlap assembly, so your alignment's going to be pretty good. You're either going to come up right on the edge, or you'll be able to move over the edge a little bit to make sure it's centered. So one of the first things that I'll do is go ahead and clamp one side on, take a look at it. Hold the other side up in the general area where you're going to put it. And make sure you have even spacing on both sides. Make sure that alignment's going to work until I can kind of drop this one down a little bit. So I'm satisfied with that. I'll move my clamp. Make sure everything is lined up right. Pencil mark. Sandpaper. And a little bit of glue. Get a good little squish. I like this hot glue for this because it's permanent, but you have a little bit of adjustment time versus using the super glue and accelerator. Sometimes when you're putting down super glue, it'll automatically lock down parts and then things can end up crooked. So at least with this, I can break it back off fairly easily if I need to. Well, let's come back to the other side and then get it in the general area. Make sure the alignment's good. Clamp it, pencil it. Sand it. And glue it. Apply some pressure. Now we have one bicep ready to go into paint. Repeat procedure on the other one. All right, both biceps are ready for paint. Move on to the forearms. All right, so the forearms, we got one side that's flat and one side that's open. We're gonna start with the side that has the edge, the open edge right here. We know the alignment's gonna be like on this. We have wiggle room to work on this side for the alignment. Go ahead and sand it down. And I like sorting my biceps or my cover strips here based on thickness, and sometimes you have one edge that's a little bit more tapered than the other. So I try to put the smaller tapers towards the ends if I can. And test fit. You can pencil mark this. I probably will here in a second. But I like to test fit, check alignment, make sure everything works before you ever glue anything down. There's nothing wrong with doing dry fitting. Well, I have a good guideline to follow. Press it in real well. I'll repeat on the other side. Let's look and see what we have. We're covering the seam. And I want to make sure they're about as even as possible, front and back. The Emperor would not approve. Okay. Now we have forearm cover strips. Okay, let's wrap up the other forearm. Go ahead and start with the sand. You know what? Why not? Go ahead and just sand the other side. We know we're gluing it. Go ahead and line up the side with the raised strip. Flip that around. Yeah, it looks better that way. Okay. One side's in. Put the other one on. Get it roughly lined up. Check to make sure we're kind of centered on both sides. Clamp. Pencil. It's already sanded. Okie doke. Now we have a nice set of forearms. Forearms and biceps are now done. We'll move on to the abdomen. Let's start with our abdomen. Centerpiece. Left side. Right side. So just starting out, dry fit. Make sure everything goes in. All right, it's a touch wide. No problem. Break the sander back out. So needs a little bit more. Could do this faster on a belt sander. Much better. Yeah, now it's going in. To get it lined up, you want it lined up on the bottom edge. Pencil marks are simple. Top. They're running along this whole strip. Those are the areas we're going to sand. Then I'm just applying pressure from the back end. If you want some extra security, drop some super glue down in there. Just to show y'all. I'd rather do this with a fine tips. Let it run down. Just a little extra security. So the right side, line it up at the bottom. Sure it's kind of centered. Pencil marks in place. Sand. Some glue in. And align to the pencil marks. So now the left side. Just repeating procedures. Center it up, line it up at the bottom and with the other parts. More rubber. Sand it down. Follow those pencil marks. Going. Now we have a completed abdomen ready for paint. I'm just now realizing that there's one component in this build series that was not built. This suit's being built with the intention of being an incinerator trooper, which doesn't need it, but that's going to be the canister. I don't have one here in this kit at all. It didn't even get made for this kit. So we're going to be omitting that. This is the little canister in detail. But that brings me to the hardest thing that we're going to assemble on this entire kit. And that's going to be the canister mount and the rear belt. So when you get your kit, you've got between a 3 and 3.5 inch strip by 37 inches long piece of plastic. This is strictly for your rear belt. And this is one of the last things we assemble after paint on the abdomen. So it's 37 inches long. I can break out the tape measure here if you want. You can try to find the exact dead center. Oh, yep, it's just over 37. So that's going to put my center here at about 18.5. You're going to take your resin canister mount and just line it up dead center right there. Pencil mark around that. Sand it. Wipe it. Go ahead and super glue. Way too much. You can definitely see I got way too much super glue on that. It's all covered up by the canister. In my case here, it's going to be covered up by a incinerator tank things. And that's about it. Now, if you want to take this an extra step further, I highly recommend drilling through these two holes right here. Then whenever it comes time to mount your canister, pre-drill through the canister lined up with those and shoot a couple screws in the back. That way your canister's mounted. You never have to worry about it coming off unless somebody really comes behind you and tears it off. Well, that takes care of this. Next segment we're doing here is going to be the thighs. And we're about to break out what actually is some of the hardest parts of this build. And you're going to have to use a heat gun or a hair dryer to heat up some of your resin. It's more prevalent when you're doing the calves. You can kind of push it and bend it around here without much of an issue. So just to make life a little easier, we got the right thigh. I'm going to start with the rear. Grab one of the short strips. Figure out which one you want to be the top and the bottom. Doesn't really matter. And I like mounting it just on the edge. You only want maybe 1/4 of an inch grabbing onto it. Gives you a little extra adjustment room. If you need to add a shim, you can glue some plastic on the inside, and that's where you can put Velcro. If you really look at your reference material, these are open in the back. They don't even close. So, same thing as always. We're lining it up, making sure we're happy with it, and drawing a pencil mark. Now, sand it. Now, in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and use some super glue. Line back up on your pencil marks. And hit it with a little accelerator. There's this one. We can come back in and do a little bit of trimming of the plastic right here to make it all look even and flush. We'll deal with that in a little bit. Now you're going to take your medium length. Figure out which one you want to be the top and the bottom. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. And you're going to run it in dead center. Now you see that there's some leftover plastic. We'll come back and trim that in a little bit. So it does bend. No need for heat yet. Clamping that in place. Pencil at the top and down the sides. Sand in that area. Wipe off any dust. We'll go ahead and use the hot glue here. I'm really getting down to that seam too, where we butt jointed earlier. Help push it in a little bit more. We're applying pressure all the way. Make sure we really flatten out that glue. And we're good to go there. We had excess here, excess there. Bring out some heavy-duty snips. Cutting back along this little edge that's over. And meet it back down. We can take it over a bandsaw or use a palm sander to get the serrations off. For this side, kind of follow the same thing. Actually, I want to attack this going this way. So to clean all this back up, I'll take it over to the belt sander to finish it off. All right, so the left thigh is done. We're going to move on to the right thigh where there's a little additional assembly with the knee block. Well, just like the left, let's go ahead and start in the back. May not have mentioned it with the left, but you're going to have that one side that overlaps. That's where your cover strip goes. Determine which one's top and bottom for you. Pencil it in. Dust it off. Thin bead of glue. Lining it up to the pencil mark. I'll put a little clamp here, give me extra hands, and get some accelerator down in there to button it up. All right, simple enough. Take our last medium strip, and we're putting it dead center. Clamp it in place so I can do my pencil marks. Sand it down real well. Dust it off. Breaking out the hot glue again. Going dead center. Line it going down. Apply pressure from the back side. And it's grabbed on and held. Okay. Do a little bit of trim ups again. You know, I'm just going to do this side of the belt sander. It's not worth dealing with. This side. I had to get through all that plastic right there. Kind of follow it back around. Boom. Done. So we'll spare you from it for right now. We'll take this back over the belt sander, finish cleaning it off, any additional shaping that needs to be done, you know, round edges, things of that nature. That's going to bring us to getting the knee block on. For the other one, we filled the seam. This one, we don't fill the seam. And this is the knee block. What I like to do here is cut some scrap pieces of wood to act as fillers on the back end, because this is what we're going to be gluing down to on the hard armor. These are actually a little shallow, so I'm kind of hoping that the glue actually catches. Before we glue these in, and sand down into it, I do the outside edges and the center. Wipe out any dust. Start on this side and get a healthy amount of super glue in there. Put our block in and hit it with the accelerator. Repeat on the center. Healthy glue. Hot. That one got me. Yep, y'all need to be careful. That one got me good. So watch out. These are chemical reactions we're dealing with. Now, before we go putting this on, come in here and pre-bend. You're not hurting anything by doing some pre-bending. We've been doing this for 26 years, putting armor together. So we don't want to force it. And you're about to see why we put these blocks on. Now, you can use plastic instead. It's just we have plenty of wood laying around. I may end up having to back these with a touch of plastic. So I'm not sure if that's actually going to make contact. It's pretty close. Yeah, it's not going to make contact. I should have used some thicker blocks. I got a little bit of spare plastic right here. It's about the right width. I'll cut some panels. That's much better looking. There we go. Much better. Like everything, if you're going to do something like this, sand it. Now go ahead and sand the back end too, because we're going to be gluing it to the armor. Line it up here, dead center. You can see now that's covering the gap. And we're doing the plastic area up at the top. It doesn't go up too high. There's not a lot of area that's actually grabbing onto this resin piece, but this is the main thing we're gluing onto here. We know to follow this line. This area has already been pre-sanded. Not real worried about scuffing it up. Dropping a little glue. Lining it up. Shooting some glue in here. Give it about 10 seconds. Fully grab. Let's flip it over. And we got that gap to work with. I'm going to fill that gap in that whole area with super glue to really hold this down. I don't like things like this popping off. Give that a few seconds to cure up. If it does pop off, it'll just get glued again. So we got our left and our right sides. And it's going to glue down about right in here. Where'd my sandpaper go? There it is. So sand that whole area. Dust it off. Let's get an eyeball on about where it is. Little glue in that general area. Let's see if it grabbed. Yep, we grabbed. So hold it down again for 10 more seconds. Let's go ahead and do the other side. Let's see, it's going to be about this area here. sand it. See your area again. Get a good mental picture of the area that it's in. Healthy amount of glue. Hold it. Shoot it. Hold it for 10 seconds or so while it grabs. Do the same thing we did to the center. I don't trust it. I don't ever trust things like this. It's going to kind of fill that area with some extra glue. And give it a shot. Repeat it on this side. There we go. Now we have a completed right thigh. Now this is the absolute worst part of this build, and probably the part that I like the least whenever I'm doing these cover strips. So we're on to the calves. The front isn't so bad, kind of like the thighs, but the rear and getting this curve here is. That's what brings us to the heat gun. Now, if you know anything about resin, heat will make it flexible. Learned this the hard way 20 years ago by leaving a resin helmet inside a car on its side in the armor bin, and it squished in just a matter of hours. Ever since then, we know that resin is heat malleable. So this is definitely where we bring in protection. You're going to need to wear gloves. I already know the areas that we're putting these down to, so let's just pre-sand it so we don't have to deal with it later. We're doing the front. Ah, good. I grabbed the left one, so we'll go ahead and do the sniper knee while we're at it. And we know this is the left. It was already set up with the overlap. So we're doing it on this outside edge here. Gonna preheat the heat gun. I'm using max heat, max fan. Take a cover strip and move it back and forth to get a uniform heat. Do both sides. And turn it around. It doesn't take too long, and you'll see the strip starting to kind of curve down on its own weight. I'm doing the front on this. It's going to need a lot less time than doing the rear, but it will be pliable. And see, it's already starting to bend on its weight. It's doing that. I'll flip it. Yeah, it's definitely ready now. Line it up at the top. Go ahead and run a bead of glue. I didn't pencil mark, but I know about where it stops, and it's going to cut off on the edge. There you go. There's the main cover strip. Repeat it and do it on the other side. Now, the thinner these are, the easier it's going to be to do your molding. More heat's going to penetrate. We want this one to be very pliable. We have to follow this curve, just like this. So I come in and do a pre-bend. I know about the shape of it. It'll stay warm. Line it up at the top. And follow that raised ridge down the back. We'll grab the other piece of armor. Squish it in. For the calf, there's going to be a part sticking out right here. Take your Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel and cut that off. For the part sticking down right here, same thing. Drop your armor on the floor first. Same thing. You're going to cut across here and then just follow this edge, and that'll make it complete. It'll save y'all trouble of doing this on camera right now, because this is the last thing we have to do. This is the left leg. We didn't do any seam filling on this. It's going to glue down on top of this. So let's line up about where I want it. Pencil mark so we know to stop. Sand the inside. We'll go ahead and sand the top of this resin for good measure. Super glue. Line it up with that pencil mark. Get your accelerator in. Hold it down here for some good measure. Go. If we want some extra reinforcement, you can drop down some glue or some super glue. Just on the top edge. Give it something else to bite into. Oh, that pretty much completes. You know what? That's mounted too high. Good thing it wasn't completely set. I'm going to drop it down a little further. There we go. That looks a lot better. Nice to check for these things before you finalize any builds. All right, you just get to see it again. Not going to be able to rip it off this time. That's much better. Now it's a completed calf. So don't forget, come back in, use a Dremel tool to cut off the excess here, and chop this off. We're going to go ahead and finish up the other calf. So sand it. A little bit of heat. Forget to flip. Saw that little bit of smoke from staying too long. Not going to kill it. It's not fun. Okay, we got some flexibility. Okay. Okay, front's on. Feet on the back, get it a little hotter. It's nice and pliable, nice and floppy. And do this pre-bend. Get some glue on. As soon as it decides to cooperate, start at the top, work your way down. I like hot glue here because it gives you that little extra time you may need to move things around. Get it set exactly where you want it. Well, just like the other one, you're going to have a little cut off right here and the edge to cut off right here. You can come back in with spot putty and fill any little imperfections, any pinholes you need. It's part of building a model kit. That's how these things work. Not everything's going to be perfect from everybody, no matter who it came from, no matter how much you paid for it. So little imperfections are normal. Well, that's it. That is all the primary assembly for a Rogue One style, series style, new production style Stormtrooper. From here, other than the little buttoning up things that we need to do, it's pretty much paint ready. So the next segment, we're going to take you into how we do paint setup and the paint process that we use whenever we're doing all of our sets of armor. So thank you all for joining us. I hope it was very informative, and we'll see you on the next one.